Hi everybody, Brian Norcross here with a 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time update on what is still Tropical Storm Francine. The big headline from this advisory just in from the National Hurricane Center is that a hurricane watch is now issued for Metro New Orleans as the latest forecast is going to lean the storm a little bit closer to the New Orleans metro area, and therefore the hurricane watch, meaning the possibility of hurricane force winds. The tropical storm warning, meaning that expect tropical storm force winds, has been in effect. But now they've added the hurricane watch just because the track looks like it's a little bit closer to New Orleans. Now, here's where we stand right now. It's a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm moving to the northeast is sort of the average motion, and there's the pressure down a little bit. Now, what is going on with this storm? So just an hour or two ago, it looked like that this was going to form kind of a big diameter, 90-mile across kind of a system. And that's called a gyre, a large circulating system. And when we get those kinds of systems, very often they don't consolidate easily. They don't wrap up easily. And so that slows any process of intensification. Not saying this couldn't become a hurricane, but it would be a slower process because it has to pull itself together into a more unified system. But now what is going on here? Because it looks like it's trying to form maybe an eye there even. But you know, then you have to ask, okay, what direction is that eye moving? It looks for all the world like it's moving like this, so that means it might be rotating around something. So is it trying to form something up in here? And then there's this kind of vertical structure going here, which is reminiscent of the area of low pressure that was offshore of Texas that caused all the rain. So the point is that I don't think anything is going to happen quickly here. And there's also clearly dry air coming up here and then wrapping down in here somehow, which is disrupting this larger circulation. So the good news here is even though the forecast is for it to intensify into a hurricane and tomorrow approach the Louisiana coast, what we're seeing here late this afternoon and early this evening is not a storm that looks like it is in an intensifying stage or any significant intensifying stage. In order to intensify, it has to consolidate and create a core. Then the mechanics of intensification can take over and it can really take advantage of the warm water underneath and so forth. But we're not seeing that at this point. All right, let's look a little bit farther to the north, and what you see up here is this big area of rain that's already moving over the part of the New Orleans metro, over up toward Baton Rouge, New Iberia, Lafayette, all the areas there along the coast, Morgan City, all getting some light rain here. And then there's a line of pretty heavy storms up here, because this is where you have the borderline between the tropical weather pushing north from the south and then the continental weather that is pushed down. You have that kind of overlap zone across southern Louisiana, and that's what we have going right now. When we look at the satellite with the wind flow from the computer model over top of it, you can clearly see what's going on here. Here's the flow around Francine. You can see it around here like this, the curved flow, of course, around the tropical storm. But look up in here what's going on. The winds are coming in this way, all here, because this is the northern high pressure kind of pushing the wind like that. And so we end up with a boundary in here, which is that old front that has been sitting up there for a long time. Anybody in the South remembers just a day ago or so, all that refreshing air that came down, and now it's getting pushed back by the tropical air. But that front is still hanging around there. So the bottom line is that the atmospheric pattern is not super conducive to rapid intensification. All this with the front up in here, this has to move out of the way, and you see that's underway. And then we'll see if there is some opportunity in here to do some intensification. It really depends on what happens with the structure of the system. But the National Hurricane Center is saying they're forecasting this to overnight tonight. When you see Wednesday AM, it means 1 a.m. Central, 2 a.m. Eastern time nominally, plus or minus, of course, 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, and then up to a 90-mile-an-hour hurricane offshore. So this is the opportunity to intensify in here before two things happen. One is that the upper level winds are forecast to get super hostile over southern Louisiana, and that would arrest any kind of intensification. It might even stop it and weaken it before it gets ashore. Those winds come down over the northern Gulf, which many forecasts show, and then we might not get to 90 miles an hour, again, depending on the structure here, and then all that other debris and those other systems. If they allow the system to consolidate, it would have to do that to get up into the 90, maybe even 100 mile an hour range. So all this disrupted system is kind of good news, but it doesn't guarantee that it doesn't come together. Quite often, systems that are big and disrupted like that don't come together, and generally do not come together quickly. But think of these forecasts here as, let's be ready for at least a 90-mile-an-hour hurricane to make landfall, where the center of it is somewhere in here. And then, of course, the winds extend out from there, and the effects, storm surge, tornadoes, and heavy rain, extend out from the center. So there it comes ashore. The idea is that by tomorrow night, overnight, it's weakening down to 65 miles per hour, and then it quickly weakens as it moves north under more hostile conditions, but it takes that rain on to the north with it. So just looking at that landfall time, here's the forecast if it were to go right down the middle of the cone, and the Hurricane Center's forecast were exactly right in size of the storm and distribution of the winds. They're thinking hurricane force winds in here, gusting over hurricane strength here, and then these are tropical storm force winds, 40 miles per hour or higher sustained winds. So starting close in here and imagining this is going up here, you're seeing in the Baton Rouge area hurricane force winds. That's why hurricane warning is in effect, that includes Baton Rouge. Here are the hurricane force gusts as they go north. Notice they're going to impact the western parts of the New Orleans metro area, including the river parishes, which are over there kind of southwest of Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Maurepas, in those areas northwest of New Orleans. So expecting strong winds in there, and this is not talking about anything about storm surge or anything like that, just winds, and then tropical storm force winds in New Orleans. And because a little jog to the right puts these winds over top of New Orleans, hurricane watch goes in effect for New Orleans. So here are the models, and you see they're generally in the cone here, and the consensus, which is the one that is most reliable, right down the middle of the cone. That's what the Hurricane Center uses as the basis for the cone, so no surprises there. When we look at the uncertainty models, we see a little broader spread than we have seen the last few days. Gives us a little less confidence, first of all, in the timing. So here you are Thursday morning, nominally at 4 a.m. Eastern. So overnight, tomorrow night. Notice some of the models are pretty far along, some lingering back. So what that's saying is that the landfall time of late afternoon tomorrow is very much plus or minus, and could go later into the evening, just thinking about the timing. All right, so here are this whole myriad of watches and warnings. The key ones are, of course, the hurricane warning that goes for the whole southern coast of Louisiana, including Grand Isle, up to Baton Rouge, and then over to Cameron. So preparations for a hurricane in that whole area. Then we have the hurricane watch in effect for Metro New Orleans up to Baton Rouge East, and that's because if the storm were to come a little bit to the right, hurricane force winds could impact that area. That's not the current core of the forecast, but there's a could in there. And then we have a large area of tropical storm force winds that, because remember, the tropical storm force winds extend way outside here, and if they go up this way, all the way to Alabama, of course, Mississippi, all affected by that. Tropical storm watch meaning possibility of winds over 40 miles per hour there. So complicated when a storm is coming ashore. And now we're talking about just storm surge, and this is the water being pushed out of the Gulf or out of the lakes over the land. Storm surge warning means that life-threatening storm surge is possible in that area. So the idea is that everybody in that area needs to be aware that life-threatening storm surge could occur somewhere in that area where they are. Doesn't mean it's going to occur everywhere. We're not going to have life-threatening storm surge from Texas all the way over here to include Mississippi. But in this area, so the biggest threat, if the storm comes in here, obviously, biggest threat is on this side where the water's being pushed up over the shoreline. And then we're also going to get water coming this way, which I'll talk more about that in just 1 minute. But it's going to be to the right, but we can't guarantee that the storm isn't going to go a little bit left or right. And we're talking about a life-threatening situation. That's why the storm surge warning is so big. The core of the forecast for the highest storm surge is here in the central Louisiana coast, up to 10 feet possible. But it does look like this is probably going to come in about low tide. So you can take another 1.5 feet or 2 feet off of that for a maximum possible, in some part of that zone, maximum possible storm surge there. And then over around Grand Isle, again, take a 1 foot or 2 feet off for a maximum possible, say up to 5 or 6 feet there. And let's look at the New Orleans metro area here. So we talked about the Grand Isle area down here in Lower Plaquemines Parish, but then up in here, if the storm is over in here and you see what the winds are doing, the winds as it's approaching are coming like this. So what's that doing? It's driving the Gulf water into this catcher's mitt here, Louisiana and Mississippi, and so that water has to go somewhere. So it's going to go a couple places. One, it's going to go up to the flood protection system, the New Orleans flood protection system. So outside the levee, there's going to be some flooding on the east side here, where this water comes in this way. But also, it's going to go into Lake Bourne right here, then to Lake Pontchartrain, and then some of that water is going to get all the way over to Lake Maurepas, and the wind is going to be blowing the water to the west side of the lake. So Laplace, for example, may get some storm surge because it's on the southwest side of Lake Pontchartrain. So when that water gets pushed that way, it's like taking a glass of water and tipping it, or a cup of water and tipping it. You end up with higher water on one side of the cup, or blowing over the top of it. You push the water to the other side. So that's what's forecast there, up to 5 feet above the normal high tide, although the high tide swing on the lake there is less than a foot, so it's not a lot of difference. Just be aware of that. The storm surge warnings are in effect for all of those areas near the water, and even over here in the Mobile Bay, a little bit of a deviation to the right can put, it's very, very vulnerable to storm surge. Put storm surge up into Mobile Bay. It's a possibility that far east. And then on top of all that, we have the rainfall. So here's the corridor that's currently forecast of heavy rain. You see it up into southern Mississippi here. There, we're talking about in the 5 to 8 inch range. Some areas, isolated areas, up to a foot of rain. And remember, this is all very saturated ground from last week's rain, where there was up to a foot of rain. So, and all this rain that falls up here has to come down to the coast through one of the many rivers or into those lakes. Into just Lake Maurepas has 4 rivers that come down to it. Lake Pontchartrain, they all have rivers, and then there are the big rivers that go all the way down to the coast, including the Alachifalaya and the I've been doing this all day. The Pearl River and the Vermilion River and the Mississippi River, of course, all going down to the coast and all subject to some kind of flooding because of the tremendous amount of rain that's going to fall upstream, all to come downstream. And by the way, that's going to take a few days to happen. So what's going on in terms of steering it? Right now, it's being steered around this high, and this dip in the jet stream is just beginning to get it. But tomorrow, the dip in the jet stream will get it more and take it on toward Louisiana more quickly, and then it will move up here into the mid-south or the lower Midwest and just die out by the end of the week. So won't be around that long. So that's the situation with the storm. It's just very important that everybody in the affected zone be ready to for the power to go out, have everything charged and ready to go, know what you're going to do, be sure you're in a safe spot, follow the instructions of all the local officials, and of course know where your car is parked in terms of both freshwater flooding, storm surge flooding, and falling tree limbs. Put your car someplace where if the winds start blowing and a tree falls, it's not going to fall on the car. Worst thing, well, a lot of worse things, I guess, but terrible thing is to go through a hurricane and not have power and lose your car in the process. So take care of that. We'll be on Fox Weather, of course, with continuous coverage. If you're not sure how to get Fox Weather as your weather channel, then just go to foxweather.tv, and it gives you all the instructions. You can get live coverage for free on your phone, on your TV, on your computer, everywhere. foxweather.tv, and I'll see you there all day tomorrow, and the coverage will continue with full coverage all across the storm zone. All right, everybody, prepare well, and I'll see you tomorrow.